Welcome to From the Book Nook,
the cozy corner for book lovers.
Each episode, join our guest hosts as they dive into summaries and insights.
And stories that bring books to life. Let's turn the pages together.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into some really cool stuff today?
Definitely. Always up for a good deep dive.
Awesome. So today we're going to be taking a look at Hernan Diaz's Trust, which has been getting a ton of buzz. And for good reason, too. From what I've been reading, it's this really intricate story about wealth and power and how those things can really mess with people's perceptions of, well, pretty much everything.
It sounds like it. I know one of the things that's been grabbing people's attention is the way the story is structured. It's not just a straightforward narrative, right? It's like all these different pieces that you have to kind of fit to that.
It's like a puzzle. But instead of pieces, you have these different narratives, these different perspectives on the same events. And it makes you question everything like, is anyone actually telling the truth? What do I think about them? Like, why do you think the author chose to tell the story this way?
Well, I think it makes the reader really work for it, which can be a good thing. It forces you to become an active participant in the story. You can't just passively absorb one version of events. You have to weigh the different viewpoints, try to figure out who to believe, and ultimately piece together your own understanding of what really happened.
That's such a good point. It's like in real life, right? We rarely ever have the full picture. We're always getting bits and pieces of information from different sources and trying to make sense of it all. So, okay, let's dive into some of these characters, these narratives. The book focuses on this wealthy financier, Andrew Bevel, and his wife, right? Yeah. What can you tell us about them?
Right. So Andrew Bevel, he's kind of the enigma at the heart of the whole story. He's this incredibly wealthy and powerful figure on Wall Street in the early 20th century. And depending on which narrative you're reading, he's either this brilliant self-made man or a manipulative and controlling tyrant.
That's quite the contrast. Talk about unreliable narrative. It makes you wonder what the real Andrew Bevel was like, if there even is such a thing.
Exactly, and that's part of what makes the book so compelling. I mean, I think it speaks to this bitter question of how we form our perceptions of people, how easily those perceptions can be shaped by the information we're given.
For sure. It also reminds you of something you mentioned earlier, historical memory. Like how much of what we know about history is actually just the story told by those in power.
Yeah.
And how might those stories be skewed or incomplete? It seems like Trust really digs into that idea.
Absolutely. The novel is set during this pivotal time in American history, the early 1900s, when there were massive economic shifts happening. You had the rise of Wall Street, industrialization changing the landscape, huge disparities in wealth. It was a time when the lines between ambition and greed, success and exploitation were really blurry. And it was also a time when those with power had a lot of control over the narratives that shaped public opinion.
I could see how that historical context would make the themes of the novel even more powerful. And speaking of power, this book wasn't just a hit with readers, right? It won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
So what do you think resonated so much with critics?
I think the way it tackled these timeless issues like wealth, power, and how those forces shape not only individual lives, but society as a whole, that's definitely a big part of its appeal. It also doesn't hurt that it's just really well written. The prose is beautiful, the characters are complex, and the plot is full of twists and turns that keep you guessing until the very end.
Definitely sounds like a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it. And I think that's what makes great literature so powerful, right? It has the ability to make us question our assumptions, to see the world in new ways, and to grapple with big questions that we might not otherwise confront.
Absolutely. And Trust does all of that masterfully, to a degree.
Well, I think this has been a really enlightening deep dive into Trust. Before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a little something to think about. If you were a character in this novel, whose perspective would you trust the most and why? It's something to mull over, maybe even spark some good conversation. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of From the Book Nook.
Thanks so much for joining us. We love having you here in our cozy little corner of the book world.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.
And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and book recommendations in the comments.
It really helps us connect with more book lovers like you.
And we'll meet you right back here in the Nook.
Until next time, keep turning those pages.
Happy reading.
Happy reading.